Okay, so we are dedicating this year to the fallen soldiers fighting in the north, protecting our northern boundary from the vicious attacks of the Hezbollah, and Shem should give them just his cloud of safety so that there should be no more fallen soldiers, no more fallen soldiers. Chas v'shalom, and we should achieve a full and definitive victory. These are uncertain times. The yes, on again and off again peace arrangements with Iran, whether they falter or whether they're concluded, either way, it's extremely, extremely shrouded in mystery. We don't know what it means, what's really going on behind the scenes, and if anything positive will be achieved, we have to put it into Hashem's hands and pray. Now, in order to do that, so what I have, what has come to my attention in the last week and really just in the last week, was that it was important at this time of travail and trouble to seek solutions that are beyond the normal range. In other words, let's say, for example, this issue of negotiations with Iran. Okay, you could look at it as a political or even military engagement, and it works along natural lines with logical progressions, assumptions, ideas, politics, or you could say the hand of God is calling the shots. And more importantly, to appeal to Hashem, appeal to God, that the outcome be according to His will and according to the best outcome possible. So it's about going above. Similarly, in Israel, Ladavonenu, sadly, there's a tremendous amount of internal pressure and conflict. We're edging towards new elections. The Knesset is dissolving. The rancor and intimidation that's going on between government and population, specifically over issues of the religious separation or integration of citizens into the army or giving them dispensations or opportunities to spend time developing their spiritual selves. This is again a similar problem because we're struggling really. What we're really struggling with is the idea of a logical, simple, scientific world versus a world that incorporates, or more importantly, emanates from something more than that. Now, if you'll ask the Iranians, and maybe this is the issue that the Western countries have failed to grasp, including President Trump. I don't know if he understands it. I would imagine he's bright enough to understand it, but maybe it's not his operating perspective or what he represents at all as a man of negotiations and business, which ultimately go to the idea of human logic. In other words, you'll make a deal if it's a good deal. If it's not a good deal, you won't make a good deal. And if you're compromised or you have pressures or positions that you need to concede on, well, it depends who's holding the cards. Whoever, kol de olim gvar, whoever is holding a more powerful position can usually wrestle the other one into submission. But that's all well and good if you work within the world of business logic, finance, pros and cons, plus and minus, benefit with a vision that life is about prosperity, success, freedom, opportunity to speak your voice. Some of the wonderful principles that democracy brings to the world, but more importantly, that are was called inalienable human rights, was called in America, God-given rights. But then there's this other dimension that if you'll ask the Iranians, they will say they'll be happy to sacrifice. Let's assume they have 90 million in a population. They'd be happy to sacrifice, and I've heard this, vast amounts of their population, maybe a third, maybe a half, maybe more. Can you imagine a complete extermination, 40, 50, that's, 60, 10 times the Holocaust, if they can achieve their goal, which is what? To impose their radical Islamic position upon the world, and which includes some sort of end game, a kind of a twisted notion of the Jewish Messiah who will bring peace and prosperity to the world and enlightenment, to the power to coerce the world to serve the God of their understanding. Now, once you factor that in, the realm of logic is no longer sufficient. we enter the realm of belief. And when you have belief, which is based on blind faith, a faith that has no logical boundaries, has no logical connection. So what you've got is a detachment. You have on the one hand this pure faith. I'm using faith with quotation marks. I'm not saying it's a laudatory thing necessarily. It's a blind faith, okay, that has no parallel or no connection to the world of the rational. Now, I'm going to go out to say that that very well might explain some of the division between the secular Western world, who would like to work at things only on a scientific level or a logical level or an observation level, and a realm of countries like Iran, when they're in their philosophies, or who knows which others, that don't view that world as what's critical. To them, what's critical is some ideological construct that, even if it flies in the face of basic intuitive morality, basic intuitive, what we call mitzvos sichlios, things that make sense. Don't rob, don't steal, don't adulter, certainly don't terrorize, torture, rape, kill, murder, and hang. And yet for them, logic is off. There is no non-rationalization of anything. Theft, deception, murder, espionage, deceit, it doesn't really matter, because to them their objective is justifies the means by any manner. In that way, also, socialist belief as a utopian communist theory, which by its definition says by any means necessary, also goes in that path, although for a quote unquote secular concept. But again, it becomes a faith against logic. I personally don't believe, in my limited understanding of Torah and mitzvos that I've achieved over these years, that the Torah advocates for either, but rather that the Torah has a full integration of both the divine and the natural world. And that Adarabah, the purpose of the natural world, is not to reject it, but rather to use it as a confirmation and as a vehicle of presenting the divine greatness of Hashem, his teachings, his light, and his Torah. So if we understand that, I'm not talking about, this is a delicate point, I'm not talking about finding a balance between the two necessarily. 50-50, 60-40. I'll study Torah and pray and meditate 60% of my day, and I'll work 40% of my day. That, in marriage, that also doesn't work. The only formula that although it seems beyond logic, is 100% and 100%. So the Torah demands of us complete emunah, and the Torah also demands of us to utilize our seichel. The difference between the two can be characterized as the difference between a written Torah only, with Torah Shebechsav, and Torah Shebal Peh, the realm in which human logic actually comes into play as it interacts with the divine information and intelligence. Which means, out of his kindness, God has extended us this marvelous opportunity that we can, all the way down on our human level, with our simple, hopefully somewhat rational minds, can actually engage in the realm of the divine, and that there's no contradiction between the two. You can fully conform to faith, and yet at the same time, never lose the concept that humans have a dot and an ability that contributes to the greatness of Hashem, instead of just accepting it as a vessel. Ironically, in today's Daf Yomi, one of the things that's studied is vessels that can receive unholiness. So they say if it's a metal vessel that's unfinished, it cannot become contaminated with the touch of a dead animal that would render it tamei, with the death of a human being which would render it tamei. It can't. It's not finished. It's not formulated. It's not. It has no. It's golme klimatefes. It's a golem. A golem is something that has no logic, like the golem of Prague. It doesn't have its own thought process. It does whatever they tell you. All right. Whereas pshute and similarly pshute kliate, simple wood, cannot become. It's just unfinished. But once you get a finished utensil, then it can be makabel tuma. It can achieve some level of contact with the spiritual realm, and that's what I'm saying. Also, if you're a golem, if you're a golem, you have no contact with any world other than the world and you're immediately sensory experiencing. Once you're a kli, once you can receive wisdom, concepts that may not have emanated from your own mind, then, which includes the idea of prophecy, which is what Torah is, a conversation with Hashem, then, then you have a chance to create something truly, truly magnificent and fulfill the will of Hashem in the process. Why do I give you this big introduction? Because I'll frame it for you within the following question. When can we get all this together? When we can find what we call a balance, the balance that we so desperately need, and that the world is showing, and maybe Hashem is showing this to us in very clear black and white terms so that we can get it. There is no way that one without the other exists. Can't. You cannot, and it cannot be compromised. So it would look something like this. Let's take for example the issues within our country where allowing yeshiva students to devote their time to learning versus serving in the army, putting their lives on the line. Both of them are values. Those are two values that you cannot argue. You can't say one is only exists and the other one doesn't exist. The concept of pikuach nefesh, that we have to defend ourselves, is part of Torah. At the same time, who will master Torah if there's no yeshivos? The yeshiva will fall by the wayside. Exposure to the temptations of the world and to, let's put it this way, environments that are not conducive to personal holiness. That's not going to yield the greatness of Torah that we need, that we desperately need, just to hold our lives together to this spiritual place known as Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael without Torah makes no sense. But to sacrifice Torah for Eretz Yisrael also makes no sense. Yet at the same time, only Torah without taking into consideration pikuach nefesh also somehow doesn't reconcile, and then we're stuck. And there is no easy solution. Here's my point: to dilute either one. You can't say, "Well, okay, so let these yeshiva boys do this, that, or the third thing." No, you're not going to get the pristine Torah light that you need. You're just not going to get it unless the people live day and night and are completely immersed in Torah mitzvahs day and night and day. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get the desired outcome of Torah learning. At the same time, if you're going to completely ignore the security issues and so on, and the rest of the population that are struggling to be here for whatever reason, then you've also somehow missed the boat. Hashem's calling us to something higher, not a 50-50 solution. You take 50, I'll take 50. Maybe Donald Trump likes those type of solutions. But they don't necessarily work. And I'd like to propose that we have a lesson from this week's Torah reading that illustrates this in magnificent form. The Parsha Bahalotcha begins with Bahalotcha Saneros. It inserts a teaching about how Aaron HaKohen would light the menorah daily. He would clean out the cups, very interesting, and Madliku Meiti Saneros. That was his job, to clean them and to prepare them and to light them on a daily basis. And that menorah was inside a building. It wasn't outside to illuminate the darkness. It was inside. So then it couldn't have been for light because its purposes were, it was indoors. So rather, it's a different type of light. And this I'd like to comment on from the position of the Maharal and the Likutei Maharal. Okay? And let me connect it to where I'm going. I said that maybe a way out of our mess is if we can reveal a type of light which will help create the harmony that we need between Torah and real life considerations. What is that? There is a depth of Torah that can bring it forward. It's almost like if you feel people are quarreling. So what do? They should go to a bet din. In the bet din, the shofet would have the wisdom to be able to evaluate the facts and come to a conclusion that will settle the case. But what if they go instead to a tzaddik? If they go to a tzaddik, he might help them think about whether it's worthwhile fighting altogether. That's different than din and judgment. He could bathe them in a light of love and understanding that would actually encourage them to back away from conflict, because maybe the conflict is for personal reasons to whatever extent. Maybe there's ego involvement. Maybe there's some blindness to a personalized interest of whatever kind. But in the company of a tzaddik who equally loves both partners and is enlightened with a special awe, they lift the spirits of those people so they can begin to see solutions that they might not have otherwise come to. To that end, I have found sources that indicate that there is, and this is a general thought that's been existing for the last, I would say, 200 plus years, that it's time that the Jewish people, in order to reach its redemption and to overcome these thorny, seemingly insoluble problems, needs to be exposed to a higher light, a Panemius HaTorah. This was the message of the Baal Shem Tov. This was the message even of the Vilna Gaon to a large extent. And he did interesting things, like he really tried to make integration between mathematical and other sciences and the deep wisdom of Torah. He would tell his students to try to master one of the what they call seven wisdoms. One of them being mathematics, another one being architecture or design, another one being biological or plant life science, and so on. He himself wrote a treatise on mathematics when he was sitting indisposed. And they have it. It's just a very fine work of mathematics. Okay? So he wasn't particularly shy of secular wisdom, but he saw it as part of a larger structure. And the symbol of that is the menorah. Okay? That's the menorah that appears at the beginning of this week's parsha. And I'll try to explain why. I have been as I said, working to understand that there is a teaching, a Kabbalah that comes all the way from the Zohar itself and from Midrashim and from the teachers of that generation of the return to Zion, starting in the mid-18th century, Vilna Gaon, Baal Shem Tov, and their Talmidim, etc., till now. And even prior to that, the Maharal, which was in a previous generation with the Ariya Kodesh and so on, that was a preparatory for all of this. So that the Zohar, which represents the hidden wisdom of Torah, is the book out of which redemption will come. This is what the Zohar says. And we were exploring that in our Shir on Shavuot. What does that mean? And there are many explanations. I don't want to go through all of them now, but only in the context of understanding what the message of this week's Parsha might be. And how we can carry that question forward a little bit and take it seriously. If it's true, then what does the menorah actually represent? So the Maharal himself says that it does represent the 36 hours that the Hanukkah candles represent is the light, the hidden light that was too spiritual. It's exactly that light that was reserved for Hashem for this era, for the end days, for the world of the great tzaddikim and masters and Talmidei Chachamim who would help us usher in an era of human and global peace and also connection to Hashem on the most profound level possible. That light was too pristine. Think of it as maybe, in a crass term, atomic power. Atomic power is not something that a person should engage in. Just ask even Madame Curie. What was the thing? Madame Curie, she was this great woman, but she died. Why did she die? Because she was exposed to radiation. Some other thing, by the way, it says about the Levim who are tasked to guard the sanctuary, the Mishkan. It says, we know that, like, the families, certain families were not blessed with long life. The Levitic families, the Kohanic families, because they were exposed to this incredible ore that in a human construct would be akin to nuclear energy. Such something so powerful, so smashing, so enlightening that it really can either blow up the world or sustain it. I have to approach it, as they say, with kid gloves, literally like children. So if it's true that there was this light that was hidden away for the era of redemption, and now we are told that by our greatest teachers and sages and saints, that era has to happen. The return to Israel and the rebuilding of the temple, Bezrat Hashem, are contingent upon the study of every aspect of Torah, including and especially not ignoring the teachings of Sod, because that is going to be the energy by which we're going to see real transformation and change. Okay, and that doesn't negate the study of any part of Torah, especially the oral Torah. In fact, the Maharal himself wanted to say a very simple idea. He says the Aron Kodesh, the Ark of the Covenant, contained the Luchot that were given by Hashem, broken, and the Luchot given by man, but essentially they're the written Torah, out of which everything emanates. But the menorah itself represents, lit by Aaron, the oral Torah, the part where us human beings, the Jewish people in particular, as Or Lagoyim, have to absorb this light and this knowledge and transform its wisdom. And Moshe Rabbeinu told us, Hi chachmaschem ubinaschem le'einei hagoyim. Your knowledge of the world and the natural world as illuminated by Torah, as a confirmation of Torah, is essential. We have to bring this light into its darkest place. So one example of that would be even just the concept of light itself. The Maharal discusses this and others discuss it, the Vilna Gaon. Light is an unusual thing. First of all, a flame will only burn upwards. It defies every logic of gravity. It only burns upwards. Because we say the Ner is symbol of the most spiritual part of man, his neshama, his soul, right? That's our inner light. And at the same time, the speed of light has a formula that can never be changed. It will only travel at the speed of light, and nothing else can travel faster than it. And that's been scientifically proven in these last 100 years as a davar pashut, but as something so incredible. Nothing can exceed the speed of light. It's almost like nothing can exceed the light of Torah or Hashem. Now, therein lies a clue that as we speed up in the realm of incredible scientific knowledge and mechanization and industry and technology, especially in these last 40 years, let's say, which we explained in our shiur, are 40 years that, according to our Mekubalim, particularly the Leshem, Rabbi Eliashiv of the past generation, the leading Mekubal Yerushalayim, were the years of accelerated ingathering of the exiles to Israel as we prepare for the final stages of world transformation, which really are right now. Right now, this year, according to the Leshem, the ingathering of the exile, which was spurred by the fall of the Soviet Union and Israel's rise to prominence, because in 1990 is when the internet went online. 1990 was when computer programming became available to the average person. Before that, it was only in governmental control and so on. And we see a radical transformation of the ability to understand our world, provide with medical breakthroughs and all positive things, study the astronomy of the magnificent world, and come to conclusions that as we study natural sciences, we see the evidence of God's masterful hand and what we would call guided evolutionary thought. But if you only want to believe in evolution without God, it doesn't all add up. Every 5 minutes, you got to change your theories. You got to change your physics. You got to understand, oh yeah, there's quantum, but quantum doesn't make any sense. But there's a theory, and it just keeps going like that as we uncover more and more mysteries of the universe. The answers are not readily available to the scientific assumptions that we had almost recently. Everything keeps changing. And so it will be, and so it shall be, that science will prove the existence of Hashem. And the relationship between that is the relationship between the written Torah and the oral Torah. As man's thought contributes to the process of Hashem's revelation. It's 100%, 100%. Our commitment to Torah, our written Torah, is 100%. Our connection to the oral Torah is 100%. There's no compromising. There's no watering it down. Now, the Maharal then went on to say, this is one of his most famous principles. So that if we assume that the menorah represents that light, our own light, without going to details, Aaron was the first person who was the step down from Moshe in receiving Torah, and he was able to use his mind and his logic to uncover the truth about Torah, that even on a higher level than Moshe. I'm not going to go into details how that was, but it had to do with the death of his sons and whether he consumed the sacrifices on the day that they passed away, where Moshe thought that he should, and he understood that he couldn't, but that was only from an analysis that made sense to a human being in comprehending the message of Hashem. And that's what Torah is. We have to use our minds and use the 13 attributes that God gave us, the tools to dissect and understand the Torah. That's what the whole Talmud is. Go open any daf, and you'll see that how do we derive logically from this pasuk this halacha in the oral Torah, whether it's tuma, whether it's tahara, whether it's any halacha whatsoever. There has to be research into how to logically link these pieces together, the written and the oral Torah, and that represents the world of 7 and 8. That's famous point in Maharal. There were 7 branches to the menorah, but the 8th is the light itself, and 8 is the light beyond, in perfect harmony. And that answers the main question of the opening of the Sedra, saying, when the Jewish people dedicated, and the 12 Nisim dedicated the Mishkan, they each came on one of the 12 days. This represents the sections of the zodiac assigned to each one of the 12 tribes as we go around the calendar of the year. And they brought sacrifices that represented unity between all the tribes, and also a reclamation of the mistakes of the world that had passed. They bring a korban that symbolized Adam, and one that symbolized Noah, and one that symbolized Shem, the father of the Jewish people, as well as all the Semitic tribes. And then they went on to bring karbanos that represented the breakthrough lives of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, our avos. And here they are, the 12 tribes, coming together and bringing it all together. The world reassembled what? In a connection to Torah. Now Aaron looks at this and says, oh my goodness, what about my poor tribe, Levi? We're left out of this incredible fixing of the world that this Mishkan has done by bringing down the word of Hashem in the form of the Seres HaDibros, representing the entire Torah. shining from our midst in within a protected sense, a protective cloud of the Mishkan. And here we have it. Here we have the world repaired, and I'm not part of it. So Hashem says, no, you don't understand. You've got the part that's the hardest part. You are the oral Torah. You're going to be the one that'll help us reach the hearts and minds of Jews throughout the ages. It's one thing to be dedicated to Hashem when you're traveling with Moshe in miraculous clouds in the desert and everything is just so wonderful. But what about in the era of the Greeks, like Ramban famously says, where they say to you, the world is a world of seven and there's no eight. There is no eight. Okay, and if there is an age, it has nothing to do with us. It's a complete separation from any otherly realm in terms of man's choices and man's obligations. So that, she says, you're going to light, there's going to be a menorah lit on Hanukkah, which is going to burn miraculously. There are 36 candles minus the shamas that you light with. There's going to come a time where there'll be Jews faithful to Torah who will find a way through the natural means to be victorious over massive armies and show that there is a world beyond, and if it can be drawn down, it makes our world truly miraculous and magnificent, and that's the goal, and not to be shut down to that concept or to that idea. Okay, so if we posit that learning the inner Torah, which is part of the oral Torah, the most to the depths, okay, that there is one book called the Zohar, and within the Zohar there's one book which contains the secrets of the secrets, and that is called Sifra Ditzniusa, the hidden book, the book that is hidden away. What's hidden away? Just like the 36 hours of light were hidden away, so too this book is a literal printout of the code of what is that light all about. And I've heard people now, I'm going to show you something here. I discover things along the way as I think about shiur and whatnot. Sometimes I get something thrown in my path that gives me an idea. This is a little book here called Sifra Ditzniusa HaMeforash. You actually can get a layman's explanation of what this mystical book is all about, which really, that's 5 chapters, which they say correspond to the 5 books of Torah. There are 5 chapters in the Sifra Ditzniusa that contain the operating system of what existed before the world came into being and how Hashem runs the world since it came into being. That's the inside story that no one would know. And here, one of the rabbis took upon himself to create a perush for the layman, for an average person, that you could actually study it, and spoke to the benefits, saying, look, it doesn't matter how much you understand of it, but just the attempt to decipher some of this hopefully can release some of this light and energy into your life and help repair it like it's meant to repair the world. So just like the world needs resolutions to these thorny issues of nuclear war, literally nuclear war, essentially, the light that can destroy, to the light of peace, tolerance, Torah, humility, midot tovot, and prophecy and guidance. Maybe we can remember that we do have an obligation to try to fathom some of these concepts, and perhaps it can even have a positive impact on our lives. So I'd like to embark a little bit on some study of this. Perhaps I'll share with it in some of the shiurim. Perhaps if you're interested, you can let me know, and I'll include you in a separate study group as we try to integrate some of these ideas as a light unto our challenged lives. Okay, as one address, of course, is Likutei Maharan, the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, who wrote about these ideas. So there's Likutei Maharan. But the Maharal was in the book Ner Mitzvah, where he makes the connection between the 36 hours and the Hanukkah candles, and the Ramban, who is coming from a Kabbalistic thought, associating the lighting of the menorah in this week's Parsha as the completion of the work of the 12 princes in dedicating the Mishkan. And now you understand the question, why is it in our Parsha? And Rashi asked that question, Lama Nismacha Parshas Nesim, the Parshas HaMenorah. That's the famous question. And his answer was, well, it's about yours is greater, but he doesn't elaborate why it's greater. And then the Ramban comes in and says, because it's going to be able to rekindle the hearts of the Jewish people when they get stuck in this quagmire, when they lose the menorah concept that all wisdom emanates from Hashem, and the purpose of wisdom, in terms of a scientific sense, is to give you a clue and to toggle you and to toggle your mind and to tether your mind to the idea of a creator, sustainer, and supervisor of life, because science will prove that that is exactly what is going on, to such an extent that that light renews every single day. It's renewable energy. And more importantly, as we enter this era, we re-enter the Holy Land of Israel, we have to pursue a higher level of wisdom and knowledge. It's just you got to up the game. Lahavdil, if you're a baseball player and you're playing in the minor leagues, there's a certain level of competition. Okay, you're going to move up one level. You're going to get the better players will continue to move up, and that's going to be harder competition. When you get to the major league level, those are the best players in the world. So we have been privileged to be the generation that makes its way back to Israel, has Torah background in education, many of us, with an obligation to spread it to our children and to anyone we can reach, right? And then to really expand our minds to be a kli, not to be a goylem, like it says in Daf Yomi today. A goylem is an unfinished kli. It doesn't contain neither spiritual fulfillment nor spiritual defilement. It's just flat. But but if we now need to toggle our brains and say, wait a minute, there's a light that I haven't seen, and to try to fathom it and study it just a bit, as much as our limited, very limited, at least I'll speak on my end, senses can absorb it, but that the average person in the Jewish people is not exempt from this knowledge. That's the shocker. No, he said, well, that's for elite Mekubalim. He said, that's the way it was. But that's not the way it is. Because we all need exposure. And even if you just say words or struggle with one concept, you did your part. Or you added to the idea that this light is something that has to be fathomed, communicated. And it's going to enhance your Kedusha because it's a refuat hanefesh for your soul. Your body may need nutrients, like this and this and that. You need vitamin A and vitamin B12 and sunshine and exercise. Yeah, how about and whatever it might be. But your neshama also needs nourishment, and that nourishment is only through Torah. And if you're in this generation and you're in Eretz Yisrael on top of that, and you're B'nai Torah, you got close to Hashem, or you ever heard of a tzaddik in your life, or you ever read a sefer that inspired you for the teachings of Chazal, which we all have, a medrash or whatever it might be, then we are not exempt. We are just not exempt. We have to try in the weakest sense possible, but not to give up and throw up our hands and say, oh, this is not for me. It's not for me. It's for everyone. That was the message of Baal Shem Tov. That's why the Vilna Gaon clarified every aspect of Torah. And that may be why we have a zillion translated books of Torah of every stripe and variety, because you no longer can say, well, I have to spend all my time learning Chumash. It's just so difficult. One second. Don't you have like 5, 6, 7 English Perushim that can take you through it with the most profound ideas? Oh yeah, and every word of Rashi is explained. Oh, now they have Targum Onkelos explained. I have to spend my time on Onkelos. And then Mishnah is impossible. I have to, excuse me. You've had Steinsaltz Mishnayos, which are magnificent for 50 years, and now you have ArtScroll Mishnayos for 50 years, And then, oh, Gemara, so difficult. I gotta spend all my day on a daf Gemara. He says, excuse me, in Hebrew, in English, in French, in this, you have translations. Why is this happening? It's part of the Geula process. But it's as if to say, you know what? There's time for 100% of that, but then there's also more time. I cut your time down by giving you pathways through recorded shiurim. You can sit and listen to Daf Yomi, and within it 1 hour or less, you can get a very, very clear sense of a Daf Yomi from the greatest teachers in the world. 1 hour. 1 hour. Now, what are you going to do with the other 23? So to have 100% commitment to both the world of logic and to the world of Torah and see them as completely connected, then we do have some space here to widen our minds. So the Maharal's is in the book Ner Mitzvah that he has. That's the concept 7 and 8. He also writes about it on the Gemara Shabbos Chaf Aleph, which is about Hanukkah concepts. Choshech zu Yavan. Yavan is darkness, precisely because it pulls the plug on the Or Haganuz, on the light of the hidden Torah, because they denied Torah's validity or the fact that it was given. In Likutei Maharan, Chelik Aleph, there's Torah Tesvav, and he actually gives us, and perhaps that could be the next address, a hint at how to go about studying some of these texts and incorporating the ideas. And what he basically says is something amazing. He says the first thing you got to do is realize that there's proper fear, there's holy fear and unholy fear. There's people fear all kinds of things. Remember during COVID and the masks and you're going out and everybody's afraid and you're afraid to go here and afraid to go there. Everybody's afraid. You got to take this shot and that shot and the third shot. I'm not saying yes or no. I have no position. I'm not going to convince you one way or the other, nor do I care to, what was right and what was wrong, but it was fear. And some of it was legitimate and some went over the top. And over the top fears, literally agoraphobia. You can be afraid of the whole world. There's every type of fear in exists. Fear of public speaking. There's fear of flying. There's fear of dating. Unfortunately, there's fear of all kinds of things, of spiders and grasshoppers and whatever else. And you have to just get used to it a little bit. Rabbi Nachman was basically saying the only thing that we should fear really is Hashem himself. And then we can sort of have a different perspective on reality where we'll say, look, a human being is anyway a temporary being. The Torah tells us our best hope is 120 years. Although now that we've crossed the Rubicon, as I've said, into the realm of Tchias HaMesim, we might get an extension. But people are reaching those long lives. Similarly, we have to begin to look at things from the perspective of not being so afraid. Don't be so afraid. Don't let fear drive your decisions. Hashem gives strength. Hashem gives courage. Hashem will give you the capacity not to be crushed by the weight of worries and problems, whether worries about finances, worries about children, worries about shidduchim, worries about health, worry about... Yeah, it can crush your soul in a half second by the weight of all these fears. Or we can realign ourselves and say, but there's another... It's true. If I had to carry all these things myself, then I would be crushed in a half second. But I don't have to carry it myself. I can cast all of these burdens on Hashem and just keep plugging along and doing the best that I can and being responsible and dealing with the realities of things, but without the crushing fear. You know, there was one fear that I used to always speak about, and I'm winding down here, was the demographic explosion of the Arabs. You know, for decades and decades, since the Six-Day War, they said, well, you have to make a peace deal with the Arabs and cut a boundary with them, because if they are allowed to be here, they will so outnumber us that we won't be they'll take over just by virtue of their population, which they may be doing in certain places in the world, by the way. Maybe a lot of places, but not Eretz Israel. Miraculously, the birth rate of Israel is so much higher among religious Jews, among Jews who view themselves as just Israelis. 3%, 3.1 children per person. That's like way above the replacement rate and higher than the Arab replacement rate. We are actually populating this country at a higher rate than the Arabs are, something that no one in their right mind could have ever experienced or thought about for 50, 60 years. But them's the facts. Can you explain them? You can't factor in, you can't explain the 7 without factoring the 8. There's some sort of bracha going on here. So if we open our eyes and open our hearts to the bracha, another source I'll mention here is in Likutei Moharan, Chelik Aleph, Torah Yud Daled, which speaks about the menorah as influence. Influence. In other words, the world is a dark place, and our perspective of having fear of Hashem more than fear alone, of seeing a higher wisdom and the possibilities that exist that deny Yush, because Hashem is always a factor and miracles can happen and do happen on a daily basis. And the place of those miracles is in that divine light. And seek it out and bring it into your life and change your attitude and change your mindset and heal your mindset. This is the job of our generation more than anything else. And that's what our great tzaddikim have told us. We need a change of mind. We need a light to shine us through a very dark period in world history. But at the same time, there's so much to be excited about and so much to be enthralled about that if you only look at the problems, you're not taking in you're focusing on the darkness and not on the possibility. So I'll leave it with this thought to be continued. Bahalotcha, Aaron was told your job is long term. So that's what it says in Likutei Moharan. So Ramban says, Aaron, forget this generation. There's going to come a time of darkness of Hanukkah. And there's going to come a time of darkness like for the Jews of America and the world right now. And for many of the Jews in Israel who just don't see it as they didn't see it then. And our job is to broadcast it out. So a little bit, you can say that by learning these texts and being inspired gives us an opportunity to inspire others. We need to be inspired and we need to share that hope with other people. That's the great light. Everybody's in need of that boost, that chizuk. I hope that our shiur and our chevra and our message can be part of that, even if it's just for ourselves. Okay, but halavai for others too. I wish you a wonderful week. And let's continue this journey, Bezrat Hashem, next week.